When we think about fixing the next 10 years of our lives, most of us start with goals. We say things like, I want to earn $1 million, or I want to lose 20 pounds, or I want to be successful in my career. And there's nothing wrong with wanting those things. Ambition is not the problem. The problem is that goals on their own are often hollow. They're empty shells if they're not tied to something deeper, something more human. Because here's the truth. Goals are what, but vision is why. Goals are things we can check off. Vision is something we can live into. And if you want to fix the next 10 years of your life, not just survive them, not just drift through them, you have to begin not with what you want to do, but with who you want to become. Let me tell you a story. There's a man named Martin who came to one of our leadership workshops years ago. He was in his mid-40s, successful by most standards, owned a business, had a house, 2 kids in good schools. On paper, everything looked right. But when I asked him what he wanted to do with the next 10 years of his life, he went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that means you're thinking. The kind of quiet that means you're afraid to speak. Eventually, he said, I don't know. He didn't say it flippantly. He said it like it scared him, like he was realizing it for the first time. And then he added something I'll never forget. I've been chasing goals for 20 years. But now that I've hit most of them, I don't feel any different. I don't feel better. I just feel tired. This is a man who had been aiming at outcomes, money, success, status, but never really paused to ask himself what those outcomes were for. That's the trap so many of us fall into. We confuse the destination with the direction. We think hitting a target means we're fulfilled, but there are plenty of people who hit targets and feel empty. So how do we fix it? We fix it by asking a better question. Not what do I want to achieve, but what do I want my life to stand for? Because if we don't start there, if we don't begin with vision, we'll spend the next decade climbing a ladder that's leaning against the wrong wall. Now, vision is different than a plan. A plan says, here's how we'll get from A to B. Vision says, here's who I want to be regardless of what happens. Vision isn't about tactics or even strategy. It's about clarity of identity. It's a picture of a life lived in alignment with your values. Think about it like this. Goals are snapshots. Vision is a film. Goals give you moments of progress. Vision gives your life a sense of direction, even when things go off course, and things will go off course. You can set goals to start a business and then a recession hits. You can plan to travel the world and then life throws you a curveball. But if you have a vision, if you know what you want your life to mean, then you'll find new ways to live it out, even when plans fall apart. When people ask how to find their vision, I usually suggest something simple. Ask yourself, what breaks your heart? What fills it? What would you still care about even if no one clapped for you, even if no one paid you for it? Those questions take you deeper. They force you to look inward, not outward. They reveal not what you want to get from the world, but what you want to give to it. There's a reason we remember people who led with vision. Think of the leaders, the mentors, the people in your life who inspired you. Chances are they didn't just talk about targets. They talked about beliefs. They had this fire, not just to succeed, but to make something better, something meaningful. You don't have to be famous to live like that. You don't need millions of followers or a best-selling book. You just need to be clear about what matters to you and have the courage to orient your life around that clarity. It might mean saying no to things that look good on the surface. It might mean taking a path that seems slower or less glamorous. But that's okay, because when you live from vision, you stop comparing your journey to everyone else's. You start running a race that actually matters to you. The next 10 years of your life don't need to be perfect. They don't even need to be impressive. But they do need to be intentional. And that starts with vision. A vision doesn't guarantee ease, it guarantees meaning. And meaning is what sustains us when things get hard, when we lose our way, when we question everything. A strong vision whispers, this is why you started. And sometimes that's all we need to keep going. So if you're trying to figure out how to fix the next 10 years, start by stepping back. Don't write your goals yet. Write your eulogy, not in a morbid way. but in a legacy-driven way. What do you want people to say about who you were, not just what you did? Do you want to be remembered as someone who achieved or someone who impacted? Someone who reached the top or someone who lifted others on the way up? Because when your vision is bigger than your ego, your future becomes bigger than your fear. So take an hour, take a day, take whatever time you need to go inward, and when you find that vision, that core belief, that cause that moves you, write it down, put it on your wall, say it out loud, remind yourself every day. The world doesn't need more people hitting goals. The world needs more people living with vision. And that's how you fix your next 10 years. By refusing to waste one more day chasing things that don't matter, and instead building a life around the things that always will. We love to glorify willpower. We admire the image of the gritty, lone individual who wakes up at 4 a.m., who grinds, who never quits, who does it all through discipline. And sure, there's something noble about effort. We should respect those who persist through difficulty. But if we want to be honest, brutally honest, about what truly shapes our lives, we have to admit something else. Environment beats willpower every time. If you want to fix your next 10 years, it won't be enough to try harder. It won't be enough to wake up with more motivation. You have to shape the world around you so it supports the person you're trying to become. Because we all rise or fall to the level of the systems we're surrounded by. I met a young woman named Aisha who wanted to change her life. She had just finished university, top of her class, smart, ambitious, curious. She wanted to write, to start a blog, to share her ideas. She had a clear vision. She had all the intention in the world, but she also had an environment that worked against her. She still lived in the same apartment she had during college, surrounded by people who didn't care about her goals. Her friends partied every weekend. Her roommates laughed at her for staying in to write. Every time she tried to build momentum, her surroundings pulled her back like gravity. She told me, "It's like I'm trying to run with a parachute tied to my back." And that's exactly what a misaligned environment feels like. The thing is, most of us blame ourselves when we fail to make a change. We say we're lazy or weak or undisciplined. But what if the real problem isn't inside us? What if the real problem is around us? Because discipline is not a character trait, it's a resource. And like all resources, it gets depleted. The more you have to fight your surroundings, the less energy you have for building your future. That's why elite athletes train in controlled environments. That's why writers have studios. That's why great companies obsess over culture. Because those who understand how behavior works don't rely on willpower. They design for it. And so can you. If you want to fix your next 10 years, one of the most powerful decisions you can make is to engineer your environment to reflect your vision. Start with your people. We are the average of the conversations we have most often. If you're surrounded by people who complain, who play small, who constantly talk about what's wrong with the world but never what's possible, you'll start to absorb that. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. Humans mirror. We adapt. We reflect the energy around us. That's how tribes work. That's how we survived as a species. But in today's world, that same tendency can trap us in cycles we never chose. So find people whose lives reflect the values you want to live by. You don't need 100 of them. You need 2, maybe 3. People who push you, who hold you accountable, who believe in the version of you that you're still trying to become. And if you can't find those people in person right away, read their books, watch their talks, absorb their thinking until it shapes your own. Your mind is porous. Let the right voices in. Then look at your physical space. Your habits live where you do. If you want to eat healthier but your kitchen is full of junk food, you're fighting a battle you already lost. If you want to read more but your phone is on your nightstand, guess what's going to win your attention at midnight? This isn't about being perfect, it's about being strategic. Put your running shoes next to your bed. Keep a journal on your desk. Move your phone to another room when you sleep. These are tiny choices, but they stack. Every time you make a good behavior easier, you increase your odds of actually doing it. I once worked with a CEO who wanted to spend more time thinking big picture, but his calendar was packed with back-to-back meetings. No space to breathe, let alone reflect. I asked him one question: what would your calendar look like if it was designed for the kind of leader you want to be instead of the kind of leader you've always been? He paused, then he smiled, then he blocked off 3 hours every Thursday afternoon. No meetings, no emails, just thinking time. That simple change transformed how he led. Not because he got smarter, but because he finally gave himself space to act on what he already knew. You don't need to overhaul your whole life overnight, but you do need to be intentional about the spaces you spend your time in, because the truth is, your environment is always working on you. The question is it working for you or against you? When people tell me they want to fix their life, I don't ask them what they're trying to do. I ask them where they spend their time and who they spend it with. Because the answers to those two questions will tell you almost everything you need to know. This isn't a message about weakness. It's a call for wisdom. The strongest people don't prove themselves through suffering. They design lives that make thriving possible. They start relying on heroics and start relying on structure. Willpower might help you for a few days, maybe a few weeks. But environment helps you for years. For decades. It's a quiet force, but a powerful one. And once you begin to shape it with intention, you'll feel it. The resistance goes down, the momentum goes up, and change stops being a fight. It becomes a flow. You were never meant to do this alone. Not in your head, not on pure energy. You were meant to grow with your world, not against it. So if you want to fix your next 10 years, don't just ask who you need to be. Ask what needs to change around me so I can become that person more easily, more naturally, more consistently. That's not weakness, that's strategy. That's wisdom. And that's how you build a future that lasts, not through strain, but through smart design. We've been conditioned to think in years. We're told to make 5-year plans, to set 10-year goals, to imagine where we want to be a decade from now. And that's fine. Long-term thinking matters. But here's the problem. When we measure life in years, we assume growth is linear, as if 1 year automatically builds on the last, as if time alone guarantees progress. But time is not the teacher. Experience is. The truth is, you don't grow just because time passes. You grow when moments shape you, when something jolts you awake, when life tests your beliefs, when you're forced to act with courage. These are what I call growth moments, and they matter far more than the calendar. I met a man named Greg a few years ago, mid-30s, quiet, thoughtful. He told me he'd spent the last 10 years of his life working at a company he didn't believe in, not because he didn't have other options, but because it was comfortable, predictable, safe. Then one day he got a call. His father had passed away suddenly, no warning, no time to prepare. And in the middle of his grief, he had a realization. He'd spent a decade building a life that looked good but didn't feel good. A life measured in routine, not meaning. He quit his job 6 weeks later. Now what's interesting isn't just that he changed careers. It's that 10 years of quiet dissatisfaction didn't push him to act, but one painful moment did. One moment brought everything into focus. One moment rewrote the story. And that's how growth works, not in slow, predictable waves, but in sharp, defining shifts. It's not the number of years that matters, it's the intensity and meaning of the moments you live through. Think about your own life. Think about the last 10 years. What actually changed you? It probably wasn't the New Year's resolutions you made. It probably wasn't the birthdays, the anniversaries, the years that quietly came and went. It was the job you lost, the risk you took, the relationship that ended, the conversation that shook you, the failure that humbled you, the moment that asked you to be braver than you were ready for. Those are the moments that fix the course of our lives, not because we plan for them, but because we pay attention to them. If you want to fix your next 10 years, stop counting time and start collecting growth. Start asking, what moments am I creating embracing or avoiding that will shape who I'm becoming. There's a reason some people grow more in 2 years than others do in 20. It's not because they're better or smarter. It's because they engage with life differently. They lean in when things get hard. They reflect instead of retreat. They ask better questions. And they don't wait for a new year to become a new person. They look for the moments that stretch them, the moments that hurt and heal and reveal. And they let those moments change them. I once worked with a young woman named Elena. She was fresh out of university, already overwhelmed by pressure to figure it all out. Everyone around her was talking about 5-year trajectories, graduate school, careers, investments. She was trying to build a spreadsheet for a future she hadn't even lived in yet. So I asked her one question: what moment in the last year made you feel most alive? She paused, and then she smiled. She told me about a trip she took alone. A moment when she got lost in a foreign city and had to figure it out without Google Maps, without anyone to help. She said it terrified her, but she never felt more capable. That, I told her, is more valuable than a year of well-behaved routine. That's what growth moments do. They remind us who we are, what we're capable of, what we care about. And they often come when we're outside of what's comfortable, outside of what's familiar. So what would happen if you built a life that welcomed those moments? What if, instead of waiting for life to shake you, you stepped into experiences that had the power to shape you? This isn't about recklessness, it's about intention. It's about designing your life around challenges that mean something, conversations that matter, projects that scare you, questions that keep you up at night. If you spend 10 years avoiding failure, you might stay safe, but you won't grow. You won't become more. You'll just become older. Time doesn't mature you. Engagement does. Reflection does. Struggle does. We often treat time like a ladder, as if you climb from one year to the next, automatically ascending. But real growth isn't a ladder. It's more like a series of jumps, moments when you leap forward because something inside you refuses to stay still. Some of those leaps are chosen, others are forced upon us. Either way, they're opportunities. And the difference between drifting through the years and transforming through them is whether or not we recognize those opportunities when they show up. That's why I believe one powerful moment, fully lived, can do more for you than a decade of autopilot. One deep failure that you learn from. One courageous step into the unknown. One decision that finally aligns with your values. And that's the real shift we need if we want to fix the next 10 years. Stop thinking like a clock and start thinking like a craftsman. Stop measuring time in units and start measuring it in breakthroughs, in lessons, in stretch. Ask yourself at the end of each month, what did I learn? What challenged me? When did I feel most alive? If you can answer those questions, you're growing, even if your goals aren't fully met, even if your plans didn't go as expected. Because growth isn't about control. It's about becoming. It's about making space for the kind of life that leaves you changed, not just aged. So don't wait for January. Don't wait for a clean calendar or a perfect timeline. Your next growth moment could be tomorrow, if you're present enough to notice it and brave enough to step into it. The next 10 years won't be shaped by how well you count them. They'll be shaped by how deeply you live them. That's the difference between marking time and making meaning. And that's how we truly move forward, not year by year, but moment by moment. By moment. We hear it everywhere. Be more disciplined, build better habits, wake up earlier, grind harder, stick to the plan. And we believe it because discipline sounds noble. It sounds like the answer. If we just had more willpower, we tell ourselves, we could finally become the person we want to be. But what if we've been chasing the wrong thing? What if discipline isn't the goal at all? What if discipline is just the scaffolding? And what really matters is who you believe you are. I was talking to a friend recently, let's call him Matt. He'd been trying to lose weight for years. Every January, he'd start a new diet. Every Monday, a new plan. He'd followed every rule, cut out every indulgence. And it worked for a while. But a few weeks in, he always slipped. One bad day, then two, a cheat meal turned into a cheat week, and the guilt followed close behind. He looked at me and said, I just don't have enough discipline. I disagreed. I told him the problem is a discipline, the problem is identity. You're trying to act like a healthy person without believing you are one. See, here's the truth. People don't stay consistent because of rules. They stay consistent because of identity. They do things not because they have to, but because it's who they are. When someone runs every morning, they're not just checking a box. They're reinforcing the belief, I'm a runner. When someone eats well consistently, it's not because they resist temptation more than others, it's because they've accepted this is what someone like me does. Discipline that isn't rooted in identity is fragile. It's constantly under attack. But when your behavior flows from identity, it feels natural. It becomes effortless. Not easy, but effortless. Because you're no longer trying to force yourself to be someone you're not. You're just acting like the person you've already decided you are. It's the difference between trying to be organized and being an organized person. One takes energy, the other takes belief. The most powerful changes in our lives don't happen when we push harder. They happen when we shift how we see ourselves. That's the core, that's the source. The goal isn't to build more rules. The goal is to become someone who doesn't need them. I remember working with a senior executive, sharp, accomplished, well-respected, but beneath the surface, he was exhausted, burned out, spinning his wheels. He was trying to live two lives, the version of himself he presented at work and the quieter, more uncertain version he carried home. He kept saying he needed more discipline, more structure, a better morning routine, but that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that his identity had become tied to performance. Every win reinforced the belief, I'm only as valuable as what I produce. And no amount of discipline could fix that. Because when your sense of self is built on what you do rather than who you are, you're always running, always chasing, never enough. So we talked. And we stripped things back. We asked bigger questions. What kind of leader do you want to be? What kind of father, husband, friend? And when he reconnected to that identity, not the role, not the title, but the values, it changed everything. His actions didn't just become more focused, they became more true, more him. That's the key. If your actions aren't rooted in a meaningful identity, you'll always feel like an imposter. But if your identity is aligned with what matters, discipline becomes a natural expression of that alignment. So ask yourself, who do you believe you are? Not what do you want to do, not what do you want to have, who do you believe you are? Because your brain is always trying to stay consistent with your beliefs. If you believe you're unreliable, you'll subconsciously sabotage commitments. If you believe you're not a morning person, you'll resist early routines. If you believe you're not a leader, you'll shrink when it's time to step up. But when you shift the belief, the behavior starts to follow. So instead of saying, I want to work out 3 times a week, try, I'm the kind of person who values their health. Instead of, I need to write more, try, I'm a writer, and writing is what I do. At first, that might feel like a lie. That's okay. Most new identities do. But belief isn't about perfection, it's about direction. It's about choosing a story that pulls you toward your better self. Here's the beautiful part. You don't have to wait for some huge accomplishment to claim a new identity. You can decide right now. You don't become a generous person after you give away $1 million. You become generous the moment you see yourself as someone who lives with open hands. You don't have to write a book to be a writer, you just have to write. Identity is built through action, but those actions have to be small enough to start and meaningful enough to matter. You don't have to change your whole life overnight, you just have to take one step that proves this is who I am now. And if you string enough of those steps together, consistent, aligned, intentional, you don't just build better habits, you build a better self. That's how you fix the next 10 years. Not by forcing yourself to obey more rules, but by becoming the kind of person who doesn't need them. Not because you're perfect, but because you're clear. Because your life flows from the inside out. Discipline will help you get started, but identity is what keeps you going. So stop asking, how can I be more disciplined? Start asking, who do I need to become? Then act like it. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Because every time you do, you cast a vote for the person you're becoming. And over time, those votes add up. Not into a habit, not into a routine, but into a self, a you that you're proud to live inside. That's not just how you change your behavior, that's how you change your life. We live in a world obsessed with short-term wins, faster results, quicker returns, immediate gratification. The problem isn't that we want to win. There's nothing wrong with ambition. The problem is that we often don't stop to ask, are we keeping score the right way? Because if you're using the wrong scorecard, even your victories will leave you empty. I once sat down with a startup founder. Let's call him Ryan. On paper, he was crushing it. Investment rounds closed, growth charts up and to the right, a team that tripled in size in a year. He had the press, the awards, the accolades. But he looked tired. Not just physically. His energy was drained in a way that no vacation could fix. So I asked him, what does winning look like for you? He paused. Then he said, I don't know anymore. I'm just trying to stay ahead. There it was. He was playing the game, but he wasn't sure why or for what. He was winning, but he wasn't fulfilled because he was using someone else's scorecard. The real danger in life isn't failure, it's succeeding at the wrong thing. We're taught to measure progress in numbers, revenue, followers, titles, deadlines, metrics that are easy to track but often disconnected from what truly matters. And when the numbers become the goal, instead of the reflection, we lose the plot. There's nothing wrong with metrics, but they're only meaningful if they point to something deeper, something that aligns with who you are, what you stand for, and what kind of life you're trying to build. The long game isn't about beating others, it's about staying true to yourself. And that requires a different kind of scorecard. I once heard about a teacher who kept a folder in her desk filled with handwritten notes from former students, notes that said things like, "You made me believe in myself," or "You were the first adult who ever listened to me." That was her scorecard, not test scores, not school rankings. Impact. Human impact. And when the hard days came, and they always do, she didn't look at spreadsheets, she opened that folder. That's what the long game looks like. It's choosing to measure what actually lasts. Because the truth is, the most important things in life can't be quantified. Trust isn't a number. Integrity isn't a stat. Love, contribution, character, these are what shape a life that matters. And yet, we rarely build our goals around them. Why? Because they're harder to measure, harder to explain, but they're also harder to forget. If you want to fix the next 10 years of your life, start by redefining what winning means. Not for the world, not for your industry, for you. And be honest. What have you been chasing? Whose approval? What scoreboard? Maybe it's likes on a post, or a job title you don't even want, or a lifestyle you can't sustain. That's not the long game. That's noise, distraction. Ego dressed up as achievement. The long game is legacy, meaning, something that will still make sense when you're 80, looking back at the life you built. I remember sitting with a man in his 70s, retired after decades in finance. I asked him what he was most proud of. He didn't mention any promotions or his net worth. He said, "My granddaughter calls me every Sunday just to talk. That means I did something right." That's the long game talking. And that kind of success takes years, sometimes decades, to build. You don't stumble into a meaningful life. You build it. Slowly, deliberately, with intention and integrity. So how do we do that? We start by changing what we measure. Instead of asking, how much money did I make this year? Ask, did I live in alignment with my values? Instead of asking, did I grow my audience? Ask, did I serve the people who already trust me? Instead of asking, did I win the deal? Ask, did I do it in a way I'd be proud to explain to my kids? That's the shift. From scoreboard to soulboard, from results to relationship, from pace to purpose. Because life isn't a sprint. It's not even a marathon. It's more like a long, winding hike. Some parts are uphill, some are downhill, and most of it is unpredictable. The people who thrive long-term aren't the ones who move the fastest. They're the ones who choose the right direction and keep putting one foot in front of the other. And the right direction is determined by your values, by what matters when no one's watching, by the impact you make that doesn't show up on LinkedIn or Instagram. So make your own scorecard, one that isn't built around other people's applause, one that reflects what success really looks like for you. If you're a parent, maybe your scorecard is how present you were at dinner. If you're an artist, maybe it's whether your work made someone feel something. If you're a leader, maybe it's how safe people feel around you, not just how productive they are. This doesn't mean you abandon ambition. It means you aim it at something worthy. Because here's the paradox. When you focus on the right scorecard, the results tend to follow. Not because you chase them, but because you became the kind of person who attracts them. Play the long game. Build trust that compounds over time. Make decisions your future self will thank you for. Invest in character, not just performance. Measure your life, not by what you earned, but by what you gave. And when the short-term storms come, and they will, you'll have something steady to hold on to. A deeper why, a clearer compass, a scorecard that doesn't blow away in the wind. That's how you build a life that matters. Not by winning fast, but by winning right.